How many times have you wanted to begin a project and just felt like you didn't have enough energy or interest? How about all the jobs you started but never finished? Or all those books that you were really excited to dive into, you got through a couple of chapters and never ended them? Sometimes lack of motivation or action gets measured as part of our overall professional performance in our career. And when we consistently fall short of being motivated and getting things done, or being motivated to get them done in a very high quality way with a good solid output, it will greatly limit our career. Of course, this also affects our personal lives, like not being motivated to stay in touch with old friends or family members, or being motivated to get ourselves to the gym. That's me sometimes. Losing interest in New Year's resolutions. That's all of us. As Christians, this can also apply, and often, to time getting into God's Word, time in prayer with the Lord, getting into the Bible and refreshing our connection to the divine. We want to, but inspiration wanes. Why is it so hard sometimes to get up enthusiasm for one thing when other things seem to come so naturally? I get excited about this, but what's making me not excited about this? How can I get the it done, whatever that is, when I really don't feel like doing it? Do I wait for motivation? Do I try to do something to get myself motivated? Or do I just force myself to go dive into that thing that I'm supposed to do? Keep watching and you'll find out once and for all. Hi, my name is Shawn Sommerkamp, and this is Motivationeer Christian Coaching. Right after church recently, a very cool 12-year-old little dude boy, who I know very well and have spent a lot of time with, him and his dad and a couple of others, in this little mentorship thing we got. He came up to me after church and he said, "Mr. Shawn," which is what kids call older people. Actually, we all call each other Mr. or Mrs. and then our first name in the Southeast. "Mr. Shawn, is it a sin to listen to music with bad words in it?" Man, that was such a cool question. I was very encouraged that he even wanted to know. And my first response was, of course, the most important response. Listen to your parents. They'll guide you through this. Definitely obey them. What do they think? And of course, he said, not of course, but he did say, I say of course because I knew he was going to say this because I know them very well. They don't really mind if he does. Now, these are not songs that have really filthy, sexually suggestive things, but a swear word here or there. So, knowing he was going to say that, I was kind of already thinking, I'm going to tell him this little quick parable about Jesus. Now, it wasn't really actually a parable. It was a scene, and I abbreviated it very much. But I told him there's a teaching, this scene where the Pharisees came up to Jesus and were chastising him because his disciples weren't washing their hands before eating the food. And it was one of the Pharisees' laws that they just created, in a sense. So, in very brief summary, I told him Jesus said to those Pharisees, it's not what goes into the person that makes them unclean, it's what comes out of them. So I told him then in that moment, which it's part of this, which comes first, motivation or action, which I'm going to get to. Thanks for hanging in there with me. The most important thing we can do is after we do the thing that we're wondering how it's going to affect us, if it's right or wrong, good or bad, monitor ourselves after we do it, and closely. In his case, it was listening to the song with bad words in it. There are things that influence us and start to develop a nature that is not what I would consider a strong character. Pay attention to yourself, little dude, but to all of us, so that when we're done listening to the song, proverbially, or we've noticed that we've been listening to it a lot, how does it affect us? So I asked him. He, by the way, told me this was his favorite song of all time, but he was really contemplating whether it'd be good to give it up or not. I said, okay, after you listen to it, how are you? Do you want to swear more? Are you more tempted to have a shorter fuse with people? Are you more unkind with your friends? Do you talk back more to your parents after listening to this song, a little bit or a lot? Or do you tend to want to be more gentle, more kind, more spiritual after listening to this song? And of course, the third option is maybe the song doesn't have an effect on you one way or the other. So I want to now introduce someone into this conversation that I'm going to say disagrees with me. I'm going to call them my special someone, just someone, okay? Let's say that someone was overhearing me have this discussion with little dude, and they say, wait a minute, Shawn, it is going to affect him eventually. If he doesn't realize it now, it's going to have a slow erosion on his character over time. So I would say to the someone, okay, yeah, maybe it could. And yet, my experience tells me something different. And to illustrate that something different is the story, age-old story, about which dog do you feed, the good dog or the bad dog. An elder is teaching his grandson about life, and he says, a fight is going on inside me. It's a terrible fight between two wolves. One is evil. He is angry, envious, sorrowful, regretful, greedy. He is arrogant and self-piteous. He walks around in guilt, resentful, with an inferiority complex, lying all the time, having a false pride about him, a big ego. The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside of you and inside every other person as well. The grandson thinks about it for a moment and then asks his grandfather, which wolf will win? The elder simply replies, the one you feed. Yes, we've heard this so many times now, it's a little cliche, but it's a great illustration. So remember that someone might have said to me, listening to music and swear words will have a delayed effect on that boy over time. It's going to erode his character. I would say, with this little parable in mind, yeah, if he doesn't have anything else in life but that, you're right, of course. But if he has a life devoted to Christ, with a commitment to loving God with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength, understanding God's way, keeping in step with the Spirit, being devoted to the fellowship, to the teachings of Christ, to the breaking of bread and to prayer, little dude's character is going to be just fine. He's going to thrive. So someone might say, Shawn, if he has that kind of devotion to Christ, he won't want to listen to songs that have swear words in them. Now, maybe you're a little ahead of me here, but I would then say to that person, well, you, my special someone, might be the person Paul is talking about when he wrote Romans chapter 14 and 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Let me pause for just a minute here. If you would, put this on pause and just briefly go read 1 Corinthians 8 and Romans 14. They're very short, and they really add a lot of depth and wisdom to this last rebuttal that the special someone gives in this case. Before I tell you what the little summary of Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 8 is, I'm not going to read it. It'd take too long. And assuming you didn't read it or didn't have time to, before I explain briefly what it means, remember the first time someone objected, I framed our response with the first greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Okay? To respond to the second objection from the special someone, we can frame our response with the second greatest commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. In this case, listening to songs with swear words in them, if little dude is listening to it and a friend of his from church, or even not from church, overhears it, comes in and hears him listening to it, is now hearing it himself and gets offended, the best thing to do for little dude is to choose, because of his love for them, his loving his neighbor, to not listen to that when they're around, because it will cause them to stumble. This is the essence of the teachings in Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 8. Paul basically says, let's not pass judgment on each other for what someone does or does not do. They answer to their Lord. We are not their Lord. Instead, let's decide to not put a stumbling block in their way. If what we do causes them harm, then when we do it, we're not loving them. Instead, don't do it when they're around. Show that kind of respect. So having responded to someone's objections about what is okay and what is okay not to do, we can now take the next steps of finally, yes, answering the question, which comes first, motivation or action? We will be motivated and or we will act based on which way of life we're trying to emulate. Yes, which wolf we're going to feed. Like listening to a song with swear words in it, if that's all we do, we're going to be swearing. It's going to be normal for us. We won't even notice that it's degrading our character. If we want to live a life where we stay motivated, where we want to take action, being focused on action orientation, we will do things that align with, and yes, even enhance, the motivation and the action we want to achieve. We will behave in such a way. We will make choices. We will develop habits. We will set up a lifestyle pattern of what promotes the forward movement we desire. Whatever our goals are, the question of which comes first, motivation or action, ultimately doesn't really matter. What matters, and this is where it's so much simpler, are the things that we do in between that either create momentum or deplete it. Like Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 8, what keeps me motivated and action-oriented and focused on activity may be different than what it keeps you motivated and action-focused. That means, like I told little dude, let's get great at taking the steps to monitor ourselves and observe after we make certain choices during our workday, in the evening, in the mornings, at nighttime, when interacting with this person or that person, and see how those choices affect us soon after. Yeah, let's say our mood, but our level of energy, our level of motivation, our desire to be action-oriented. What choices do I make and behaviors do I take that undermine my motivation? That's critically important for me to know in order to be successful. I think you would agree, right? What choices and behaviors distract me from achieving what I really want to desire? I'm going to tell you what those are specifically for me. I'm not saying they're going to be the same for you. I have found in all my years of coaching that a lot of what I'm going to say will also apply to you, but it might not. None of what I say might apply to you. What I'm going to do first is tell you the things that I do that inhibit motivation and my action orientation. Then I'm going to tell you things that I do that enhance my motivation and enhance my drive and ambition, okay? I won't be able to stay motivated and achieve the action-oriented end goals I want when I stay up late and sleep in. I don't do that anytime. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, I pretty much go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. If I don't, it wrecks my motivation. Eating a bunch of sugary food or greasy food or fast food or food with preservatives really wrecks my motivation. It drains me. It's amazing. For me, choosing lazy activities like watching a bunch of television, it distracts my mind. I love movies. I love well-done TV shows. But if I'm doing that a lot, it is really going to affect my motivation. If I'm always thinking about how to serve my own needs, my own sinful desires, that's going to zap motivation for me. Spending time around people that are chronically negative, ooh boy, that wrecks my motivation. Spending time around people who are constantly taking from me and rarely, if ever, giving, that does affect my motivation. I think, honestly, I just thought of this. It's not in my notes, but I know when Jesus crossed the other side of the lake after feeding everybody, all the people kind of chased him over. They commandeered all the little boats along the shore and, went across the lake to find him. He said, "You're here just because you want more food." I get that. So what I'm talking about here are those that are Christian, fellow Christians. Of course, we don't want to be yoked together with unbelievers, but we will work around them a lot. I'm telling you that there are Christians who just completely 100%, I know you know this, lack motivation all the time. They have no ambition whatsoever. They choose the lazy way a lot. And sometimes, maybe even a lot, I've been noticing lately, Christians that have a lot of motivation and drive and ambition, but it's for very, very worldly things. I don't want to be around a lot of them. I'm not saying I'm shunning them. I'm just not going to keep them as my inner circle. These are the things that I do that keep me motivated and action-oriented. Watching YouTube lectures or discussions that align with my goals in place of watching TV that kind of make me want to be lazy. Going to bed early and waking up early, of course. Getting to the gym at least three times a week, 3 days a week. That's a tough one for me. So, morning stretching is kind of my in-between when I'm kind of off of that rhythm, but that's a great thing for me to do, is get to the gym. Eating foods, and especially in the morning, that are high fat, high protein. Looking out for others in my fellowship, or I'll say my Christian realm of influence, that could use a helping hand. Sometimes, because of what I do, I'm out and about traveling a lot and working with people that are not part of my local congregation. I can be serving them as well, looking for those that could use my assistance and help. Building a network of friends and colleagues that do have the same type of ambition as I do, which very specifically is ambition for God's glory in all that we do. When it comes to motivation or action, science shows it tends to be action that comes first. It's still argued, but it's mostly proven. We make life choices that allow instant access to motivation when it's required. In fact, we want to stay motivated all the time, a state of motivation that keeps us in a state of action. We're looking for stuff to do, excited and curious and driven. When we're making poor choices, we get comfortable and in a state of low or no motivation, low or no ambition. And then when we find ourselves inevitably in a situation where motivation is demanded of us, because we haven't been acting in that way to beef up motivation, the only way to access motivation is to completely rearrange our lives. Or as what some people do, they get desperate and ask everybody else to save them, in a sense. Not looking down on anybody, but that is really an alternative. Proverbs 24:33-34 says this: "A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a bandit, and scarcity like an armed man." I pray all the time, God, please show me who around me is beaten, bloodied, and bruised so that I can be of service to them. It's a constant prayer. That's because of the parable, or it is the parable of the Good Samaritan. I think Jesus was telling a story that he framed as a parable, but a real life actual situation where a person was traveling along a trade route and got waylaid by bandits, and then a Samaritan came along when every other religious person avoided him, crossed the street, and this Samaritan stopped what he was doing, probably a business person, although I don't know for sure, and used his resources to help this person. I think that kind of connects with me with Proverbs 24:33-34. The person traveling along the road got complacent, a little sleep, a little slumber, got lazy, and bandits waylaid him. I think this is, now I can't prove it, I'm not saying I know for sure, but I think making this connection for me in my mind really helps me stay motivated and on the edge in a spiritual way. That's really what I'm trying to do, be spiritual. Of course, I'm only speculating. I am convinced, though, as I hope are you, that living for Christ is how we achieve true abundance. The abundance that can only be filled by God and His love and His kindness, the teachings of Christ and the lifestyle of Christ. This is what I think it takes to live a balanced life to stay motivated. I'll end with this, Proverbs 10:4-5. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. I do want to hear what you have to say. If you don't mind, don't send me notes right after you've listened to a song with a bunch of swear words in it. Thanks for listening. I hope you stay motivated. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll know when I create a new video. Please also consider becoming a member at Motivationeer.com. Your membership really supports this channel. And don't forget, your career is not just a way to make a living, it's a way to transform the world.